Welcome back to Movement Monday. I am joined again by our good friend, Coach Jared Slater. Jared, once again, is a college baseball player, former college baseball player. He now is interning at TCU, doing strength and conditioning, helping athletes reach their highest potential. Jared, thanks for joining us.
Of course, thanks for having me again. It's a good thing to be on again.
Right. Now, last time we talked about a lot of spinal engine. We talked about mobility and movement over traditional strength and conditioning as it pertains to lifts such as like back squatting and real heavy core brace style of training. But from my understanding, it sounds like you have some new ideas and some new thoughts as it pertains to sports performance and just overall human performance. And I would love to hear more about what you have to say.
Yeah, so I think one of the things I've really taken interest to is the mechanics of breathing, and more specifically, people and athletes being stuck in an inhaled or exhaled position. So our rib cage is very malleable near our sternum. It can flare up or it can come down depending on whether we're seeking the ability to inhale or exhale. And I came across this through a course made by Connor Harris, just his biomechanics course. And it talks about a lot of PRI concepts, and there's a lot of debate on PRI, whether, it helps or really doesn't. But what I thought was really interesting from the course, and I guess with PRI in general, is that a lot of people lack the ability to fully breathe or access all four of their breathing cavities. You have four cavities that which you can breathe into. And a lot of people are really good at breathing, shallow chest breathers. They're really good at breathing in the front and the top, but a lot of people lack the ability to really fill out the middle and the posterior part of breathing. And so after looking in the class, in the biomechanics course and doing my own research and having some anecdotal evidence, I feel like a lot of people are really missing the ability to breathe correctly, and that's then impacting their movement patterns, which can impact their injury. But I think a lot of people are really, really missing the ability to just breathe correctly.
Interesting. So elaborate a little bit more on how having the inability to access certain breathing cavities can hinder movement.
Yeah. So to start, so you have this angle in your sternum called your ISA, or your ISA. You have an ISA and an IPA. ISA is infrasternal angle. IPA is infrapubic angle. Both of them are related. So you can have a wide angle up top and a low or narrow down below, or vice versa. So the reason why I'm saying this is because your body will change based on if you're trying to inhale or exhale. So within that, if
Change what?
you're, I'm sorry.
Change what?
So your ribs can either, your bottom two ribs right here can either flare up like this if you're trying to seek an inhalation strategy because you're having trouble fill, and they can come down like this if you're trying to seek an exhalation strategy because you're having trouble pushing the air out.
Okay.
So within that, when that happens, up top, down below is going to be affected. So you can be missing, let's say you're missing some hip IR or hip internal rotation. That could be because your pelvis is shifted in orientation. And so basically our pelvis will sit like this, and it could be shifted, one of the ilium could be shifted like this or could be shifted like that. But if one of them is shifted a certain way, then that's going to push up. And so we now have compression up top. And if this is shifted up, we can't move our femur now, because our femur is only going to move where our pelvis sits. So if we get our pelvis sitting back here instead of sitting up here, then we can now get that movement back, that IR or ER, whichever one you're trying to chase. And a lot of the times it's pushed this way because we're trying to breathe, and that's how our body's going to push that diaphragm up. So it might not always be because, oh, I'm super tight. Well, it could be because you're seeking a breathing strategy that forces your body to push your pelvis to like clear space for your diaphragm to move. So having the ability to not breathe correctly, or the inability to breathe, can affect your movement patterns because your skeleton's going to shift and change in order to breathe.
Right. So we like to say you have a natural way of moving and an unnatural way of moving. The concept with a natural right way to breathe and an unnatural wrong way to breathe, when you're doing it the wrong way, then you're saying it's going to make your body in different areas, mainly at the hip level and the pelvis level, start to compensate to make room for the diaphragm to move. And then that's going to cause some and abnormalities, say, in your movement patterns?
Oh, 100%. And not just at the pelvic level too, like at the trunk and pelvis, your rib cage, we can be shifted one way. So if we're shifted one way, we're going to have better ER, we're going to have better ER on the side we're shifted to because the rib cage is going to be tilted this way, and better IR, internal rotation on the side we're shifted away from. So
Okay.
it affects everything up and down. And if we're like, if for example, like with what you guys talk about, if people are always getting on that inside edge, maybe they're always on that inside edge because because their pelvis is shifted in a way where they just can't even get into internal rotation or external rotation. They just can't get into either because of the way their pelvis is shifted. And maybe if we shift their pelvis back to, center or true, they might regain that range of motion without having to do mobility, stretching, all this other stuff that you hear about in the like mainstream fitness. Is what if we just give them the ability to breathe back and breathe correctly? Then we can get them to move, and then there you go. You're locked in that position, and your hip is able to fully move as it should, rather than it's moving based on because you can't breathe correctly.
Right. Right. Okay. So with that in mind, we talk a lot about some things that cause some wrong movement patterns and some wrong postural stuff. What causes someone to start only doing short, shallow chest breaths or to breathe incorrectly? What kind of starts that?
So, in my opinion, there are a couple of things. I think the biggest one is, how we live our day-to-day lives. A lot of people are always on their computer, super rounded forward. So, my opinion is people's poor posture isn't because you're hanging out in this position. It's because it's not that the muscles are like, oh, you're doing this, and now we're going to relax. It's actually because your body's like, hey, I'm always in this position all the time. So I have to learn a strategy to breathe in this position all the time. And your body will then change for that strategy. So it's pretty much your everyday lives. That's the only way your breathing changes. But just how in the weight room or whatever stimulus you give your body, it's going to adapt to that stimulus. The same thing with breathing. If you're always stuck like this, your body's going to figure out a strategy to breathe like that. Or it could be, there's a debate with this specifically if it's, hard rotations are changing it versus breathing. And I'm not really sure which side I stand on as of now. But to me, it makes the most sense that whatever your most common daily posture is, and again, you can have many postures because just how you can have different movement patterns and different movements, you have to be able to access all these movements and access all these postures. But if one posture is predominant over the other postures, that's what your body is going to seek as a breathing strategy. So to sum it up, it's pretty much just going to be whatever posture you find yourself in the most is the strategy that your body is going to take for breathing. So if you're super rounded, you're going to be like that. If you're laying down, your body's going to seek a strategy when you're laying down, and just so on and so on.
Right. So just as much as improper breathing can affect posture and movement, it's also a vice versa two-way street here where improper posture can also start some improper breathing, and then that would just exacerbate the problem.
Oh, 100%. Because the only thing your body cares about is maintaining homeostasis, and it does that through breathing. Like the body doesn't care that you're moving incorrectly. All the body knows about is, I want to breathe, I want to stay alive.
Mhm.
So it's just how with movement patterns, it's going to change. Like your posture is going to determine how you breathe. So if you're constantly in bad posture, you're going to be constantly using bad inhalation and exhalation strategies.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So we talk, pretty much solely on lifting inputs may cause you to move one way. And that's kind of our big focus, right? We kind of take the opposite road of the mainstream and say that this type of lifting that's very traditional, it's what we've been doing for 50 years, is actually, if you look at the film, it's causing you to move like this. And so that's kind of, that's our fight that we kind of picked, that we picked to fight. And I was then wondering how much does the traditional strength and conditioning that we do, the core bracing, the heels down, the hip thrusting, all these things that we've talked about in the recent episode where it's causing some movement patterns that we don't want. How much then do you think is this playing into our improper breathing? Like, does it make it worse? Does it? make it worse at a much faster rate than just say like having a desk job or anything like that?
I'm not honestly, I'm not too sure. I think it's equal and opposite. I think both of them are affecting it equally because you're using this posture that you have to now perform the exercise that is affecting your movement. So in a sense, I guess it's both. I would say I think I would say that maybe the lifting is making it worse because you're now reinforcing compression in that position. So if you're reinforcing compression with poor posture already, you're almost solidifying it more and more. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So then would you, yeah, that makes sense. And then would you also say that, when you're doing a workout, you are increasing how many breaths you take? And so does in that situation, does the frequency or the volume of the amount of improper breaths that you take play a role in the long term?
I think it could. I think it's really just the amount of breaths in general. I mean, you could definitely say that breaths during workout are more intense because you obviously have to breathe more because your heart's beating faster. So you definitely could say that. I would also say that I think right now my opinion is it's just in general. I mean, the
Mhm.
total amount of breaths, like you work out for hour, 2 hours a day, hour to 2 hours a day ish. If you're, the average person works out less than an hour a day. But if you
Right.
take working out and lifting seriously, you're like an hour to two a day. If you're an athlete, you got that plus your practice time. So you're taking tons of breaths throughout the day. But if you look at the total time of athletic behavior or doing your, let's say, a practice for 3 4 hours, and let's just give them benefit of the doubt, which is crazy, but 2 hours of lifting. So that's 6 hours of what we could classify as intense breathing or more strenuous breathing.
Mhm.
But that's 6 hours of that versus now we got 6 hours, we got 18 more hours of the day. Hopefully 8 hours of that is spent sleeping, where you're not even in control of your breath, no matter what you do. Because during the day, you can at least you can be like, all right, I actually want to control my breathing. You can do that. But at night, you're breathing how your body wants to breathe, whether you like it or not.
Mhm.
So what's to say that that 6 hours isn't as impactful as the other 18, or if the 18 is even greater than, because even though it's more strenuous, but eight, but that's 6 hours of really not thinking about breathing versus 8 hours of not even controlling it during sleep.
Yeah.
So it's like a give or take with both, and I don't know, it could be either, but I think that it's just the total amount of breaths is what's making it worse.
Right. All right. So now you got me curious. I'm thinking about it now. So what does this feel like? Like I breathe and I do kind of tend to breathe up here. I'm like, I feel the chest move. I kind of feel my stomach kind of come in a little bit. And so what is this? How does it feel like now to access this posterior cavity? How do I consciously kind of work on it as I sit here?
So sitting is kind of a tough one because you have gravity impacting you and there's all these other factors. But the help here I like to classify it is when you breathe out, you want to imagine like you're blowing up a balloon, and they actually have videos of people blowing up balloons to breathe out because they want to feel side abs turn on to like fully compress the diaphragm. But I think the best way to like really feel, so the best way to feel proper breathing mechanics is lay on the ground. So supine, you can either have your feet 90 degrees on a wall, or you can have, them flat on the ground. And you want to take your index finger and your thumb and put it around your torso. So the thumb is on your abs, and this will be on your low back. You put on the side, and when you breathe in, try and feel that place expand. And when you breathe out, feel it kind of come back. Now we can obviously use gravity to our advantage, and we can put you in more advantageous positions to basically use gravity on our side and force the air down versus forcing the air up. So if we, had someone that was struggling, let's say someone is struggling with their right hip internal rotation. And let's say that we have made the choice that you need to expand your mediastinum by your right hip. We're going to put you on the ground, and we're going to isolate the rest of your base. We're going to compress the rest of your body so that the only place that you can breathe is that right hip. And then we can force breath into that position. So it'd be the same whether you want to learn how to breathe correctly. So if we're too much up here, that means that we now need to get all the air down here. So we're going to put our body in an advantageous position in order to get the breath down low. And that could be tons of different there's so many different variables that go on with it. But the best way to do it is lay on the ground, pointing finger on the index finger on the top, thumb on the bottom, try and expand on the way out and breathe out breathe out when you're going out, but breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your mouth, and try and feel side abs engage on the way out. And then over time, doing that more and more, your body will resort to the path of least resistance. If you teach it that that's the path of least resistance, it will eventually go to that.
Yeah, it's positive, negative inputs. So that kind of being two baseball guys, that makes me think of a name with a lot of controversy around it, but we're going to put that to the side and just stick with the message that's being portrayed here. But Trevor Bauer, I remember watching a YouTube video of him probably 3 or 4 years ago when I was still playing. I was my first year in college, and he had done that. He had put his index finger on his side and the thumb behind, and he would apply pressure and breathe that way. So that way he'd feel that pressure. Now his method to his madness is he wanted to go from the sympathetic state to the parasympathetic state. That way he could kick off recovery just like that. And so he did that as a part of his, if I remember the video right, like I said, it was like 3 years ago. But he said that he would do that with his recovery program, doing his drive line and stuff. So then my freshman year, our strength and conditioning coach at the end of all of our workouts, or at least one of them a week, he would have us lay down on the ground, like you said, backs on the ground, knees up, not against the wall. They were just up. And then we would put our fingers like that and breathe, but it was the same principle. It was the sympathetic to the parasympathetic. It was more physiological. And so this is the first time I've, really kind of heard, the case that this could be affecting us from a biomechanical standpoint, which I find super interesting. And, the concept makes sense, right? We're compensating to do something the natural and the right way, to breathe the right way. So we need to compensate because, to breathe, we use our muscles. And our muscles are sewn a certain way, is the way we put it, to function in a certain way, in a specific way. And when you're not doing that, you need to start compensating. And we talk a lot about that all the time, compensation, and how the people who are the best at what they do, they oftentimes just tend to be the best at compensating. And so that's really fascinating.
I wanted to expand that for a second. So with the whole, parasympathetic and sympathetic state, sympathetic being, ratcheted up, ready to go, your body. So with that, when you're like that, your breathing does become shallow, you become tense, and you're super anxious whenever you're like that. And so it's hard to move the body in that state versus in a parasympathetic state, you're relaxed, you're loose, the body can now access positions, whether it be movements, cavities, whatever, much easier because you're not super like tensed up. So a big thing with this that that you just kind of brought up is that, yeah, it does make sense that if we're now doing full complete breathing, now we can actually get access to these cavities and get access to movements that we didn't have access to before.
Right. It's another piece to the, kind of the big puzzle that as an industry we should all be trying to solve, which is, why are we all getting hurt? Why is everyone getting hurt? Why is everyone in pain? And, our side is we're moving wrong. And, that's your side too. But you're introducing a new idea and bringing it to the table. And I mean, yeah, it's the whole body's tied together. It's a very holistic system. And if one thing's off, it's going to knock something else off.
Yeah. I mean, everything's connected. So if one thing's not like, for like, if the foot's not working right, nothing above it's going to work right. It's just how it is.
Yeah. And so, how have you have you been using this with your athletes and stuff, or kind of been trying it out, having them do some exercises or focus on it while they do exercises or whatnot? And if you have, what kind of results have you been seeing with it?
Yeah. So I have a couple anecdotals. Without naming names, obviously, certain athlete struggling with TOS, and with this athlete, I decided, or it was brought to my attention that this athlete was having trouble and was almost out of options. And so I, just asked, hey, do you mind if we try this? try it out with the athlete, and now this athlete's going on, I think it'll be couple weeks now without any TOS symptoms. And you know what, it could 100% be from what I did, or it couldn't be. It could be a combination of things. But all we did was give this athlete access to different breathing cavities that they didn't have before. So that's one of them. I have a couple other athletes that are struggling with some. I know I always bring up the hip IR and ER. That's just on my mind because I have a couple athletes dealing with I wouldn't say poor hip ER and IR, but poor access to hip ER and IR. Like their bodies have it. So if you put them through any sort of IR or ER test, they get stuck at a certain place. But if you then push their pelvis so that it's back to neutral and then you move them, they have the movement there. So they're not saying that they don't have IR ER, but they are lacking access to it. So with these athletes, I've been giving them, you know, a couple of things specific to how their pelvis is oriented in order to get it back and give them access. And so far, you know, I've seen pretty good results. Now, granted, I think my sample size right now is like 4. So still a lot more to go, a lot more room to grow, a lot more to learn. But I definitely think it's really interesting that using this idea that we're missing expansion in our breathing cavities is working. I think it's pretty cool, honestly. But I think one thing that has to be said with it is it's not just breathing to breathe. So you give them access to the cavity that they need. So for example, with the hip athletes, giving them access to their hips and then going to the weight room and solidifying it, because nothing's going to work if you don't solidify it in and then have them move in that way. If it's the same thing with anything. You can stretch, like you can stretch and open up, you know, your T spine. But then if you do nothing with it, it's not going to become stretched out. You just stretched it and then it's going to resort right back to what it did before. So you have to give them access and then show them how to move in that capacity.
Right. You got to show them how it's like baseball, right? You put the ball on the tee, you teach them how to swing and how to hit the ball while it's not moving, but then that ball is going to move. Now they need to know how to hit it while it's moving. And it's kind of the same principle, right? We want to teach them how to breathe, but then we need to teach them how to breathe while moving, is what you're saying.
Exactly. We're not teaching them how to breathe while moving per se, is more give them access to breathe where they need it and then have them perform a movement that requires the recruitment of whatever area you were working on. So if we were working on, you know, right shoulder internal rotation or like the right side of their body, they have, let's say they have poor right side thoracic extension. We'd give them I give them access to that to breathe there, and then we'd move through that range of motion with some resistance, strength, isometric, eccentric, something to challenge the system, given that it has room to move now.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. So have you come up with a name for all like some of the exercises or anything like
They're none of them. I wish none of them were mine. These are exercises that come with the course and
that?
just some stuff I've seen online. I don't really. There's so I was like Connor Harris has a bunch. Zach Couples is another. Um, there's a couple others too, and then there's just other principles from other systems that I've read about and learned that I've combined into it that I think help it even more. So just some, I guess you call it triphasic principles because we're using long isometrics and some eccentrics to help solidify the position. But these are all exercises from other people that have designed that. I wouldn't say they might be PRIs, but I got them from Connor's course, some stuff, like I said before, some stuff for Zach Couples, and then such some other stuff that I've seen online. And like anything, it's like strength and conditioning. This is kind of off topic, but strength and conditioning coaches are the best. All good strength and conditioning coaches are good thieves. No one's really reinventing the wheel per se. The wheel has always been the wheel. But what everyone's doing is we're all taking things from everywhere and combining it together. And that's what makes a good coach is how many you like, oh, I like this, I like this, I like this, and we're combining it. Because I know with you guys took some stuff from Goda, you took some stuff from other places, and now you've combined it into your system. So everyone is just taking what they think is going to work the best and putting it all together. And so it's really like give credit where credit's due. None of this stuff is really mine. It's just I feel like the way I'm applying it is really, really helpful.
Yeah, right. And so the way I kind of look at it as your best coaches are going to be your best discerners. Can you discern from what's helpful, what's not helpful? Everything could have a little bit, it could be helpful in its own way, but when you're working with mass numbers and when you're working with a lot of athletes, you need to be able to discern and decipher what is going to be worth my time because you have very little time with your athletes, with your people. You're looking at 45 minutes to an hour a day. Some of them, your more dedicated ones, will stay after, come in early and stuff like that. But we need to get to point A to point B fast. And we need to do it in an efficient way, in a way that they're going to understand. And so that's what we've tried to do so well, as you're saying, is yeah, there's been a lot of inspiration from many different systems for what we do. We both went to school for it. So just with all the knowledge that we compiled, we sat down and refined and said, we want to get from bad movement to good movement. How fast can we do that? What's going to help us? And I'm super stoked to try out some of this stuff. And of course, I'll probably be my own lab rat and I'll test it all out on myself and kind of see how I feel. And what I'm really excited for, and I don't know if you've done it, have you kind of look at any film of movement or anything like that since doing this?
I've definitely looked at mechanics a little differently now. I feel like I've always had a really good eye for when it comes to pitching mechanics of finding, where guys are, losing certain ranges of motion or they're not getting into this. But it's kind of changed how I look at it rather than, oh, this guy is missing, let's say let's say he has late pelvis on the mound. So let's say everything rotates and his pelvis, when he gets into foot plant, back leg isn't completely rotated all the way through. And I was pushing the ball rather than saying, hey, maybe we need to play with your foot position or we need to, delay your trunk. What if it's you might not be able to completely rotate your back leg? What if that issue is that entirely? What if it's not a mobility thing? What if it's just like now, like what if it's a breathing thing?
Mm-hmm.
Like I with and then even with you guys with looking through gait, there's this course is a whole thing about gait, how you go through the ER to IR as you walk through your gait cycle, and about how everything up works, across the body to get you to walk correctly. But I definitely think I've always looked at movement, but I don't think I've looked at it in the way that I have after taking this course and with training and combining the two together. And then rather than fixing issues with mobility work, fixing issues with, I guess what I would call like what you guys say, like movement work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fascinating. So then having our own system here where we're trying to get people out of pain and to move better, how might we be able to integrate this in your eyes and combine it that way we can get maximum benefits from the move pain free system?
So I think as it could be as plain as simple as when you guys do your movement screen, do like a breathing screen too. So have them face you, take a full inhale and exhale, turn to the side, inhale, exhale, turn around, inhale, exhale, turn the other side, inhale, exhale, and back around. And then you can see where in their body they're breathing to or not breathing into. And then from that, you then cross-reference that with their movement screen and say, hey, we notice, you're tipping your left hip up when you stride through or whatever it is. You can relate that back to their breathing and say, they are having a lot of trouble expanding on like the lower left side of their stomach. Looks like they're having a hard time doing that. Maybe if we get some expansion in that side, we can help with that hip tipping up. And then we can put them through and recode them to get them to move the correct way. So it's more just gives you an extra level of insight into what's going on. So including, you know, I guess I call like a breathing screen. So giving them a breathing screen saying, hey, we noticed this in your movement, but we also noticed this in your breathing that can be affecting your movement or vice versa.
So then when you prescribe them then a movement routine, you could add in, say, that breathing exercise we talked about earlier and kind of teach them how that feels. And then over time, integrate that into, say, like our MPF squat while they're performing that, or a certain rocker where they're focusing on internal rotation at the hip level and stuff. just get in these positions and then take that type of breathing that we were doing on the ground and apply it to this exercise and do it at the same time.
Exactly. I would almost use it as almost as like a warm up or an activation or a primer, using it first to give them full access so that now it might speed up their ability to perform the movement that you prescribed and become more proficient at it quicker because they're now not fighting their own anatomical design. They're not fighting their skeleton. They've now pushed whatever they need to push back and given them the space there. So now that when they go through and recode, they're now able to own that a little faster and a little easier because they're getting into that position, not fighting themselves.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Again, this is all, just like a total, I mean, everything's a guess. Everyone's just guessing. We're just making educated guesses based on what we've read, what we've learned. So this could all, this could all be wrong or it could all be right. But I think, helping people is what you're doing and what I'm doing and what a lot of people get in this industry to do is just to help people. And whatever way you want to figure out to help people. As at the end of the day, as long as you're helping people, that's all that really matters. So if people want to comment and say, "Oh, this is completely wrong. This is BS," whatever, great. It totally could be, but these people have been helped and they feel better now because of it. And so, who are you to say that that's right or that's wrong? It worked for these people.
Exactly. It's if you're getting results and you can see them, they're feeling them and they're testifying to that, you're not wrong.
There's
Because you're accomplishing your goal.
exactly at the end of the day, everyone wants to be out of pain. Everyone wants to move without pain. If you're doing it if you're doing it with MPF, if you're doing it whatever way you're doing it and it's working, stick with it and run with it because it's working. And if it's not working, you got to find something else. But like I know a lot you guys get a lot of hate for commenting certain things or saying what you guys do, but you guys get results with it. And so if you're getting results with it and people are not only getting out of pain, but they're not getting worse and they're getting out of pain. So like there's something to it, whether or not it's right or it's, whatever it is, it's working. And it's the same thing with this whole breathing stuff. It could be completely wrong and it could be something completely else, but as of right now, it's working, and so that's what I'm running with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just so some final things I wanted to say about this is this is not, you know, this is not meant to like take the place of anything else. This is just something else to try in and add to your routine. And a big thing I caution with this is because of what I've seen personally with what it can do on the good side, it can also reinforce the bad habits you already have even more. So it's really important that if this is something you want to pursue and you want to try and fix your breathing, it'd be important to read up on, on PRI, on Zach Couples, on Connor Harris, and really make sure you know what you're doing because whenever something is super good, there's also going to be a super bad side to it. So making sure that if this is something you want to pursue, doing it with someone who's like not just taking the course, but like understands it, understands what you're trying to go for, because you can reinforce your bad habits by thinking you're doing the correct breathing drill in order to gain some sort of expansion, but you're really compressing your issue even more. So I think take this with a grain of salt and be like, oh, Jared told me that I have to breathe like this, and I have to. There are some people who actually need breath up here. I was one of those people. I used to be such a shallow chest breather that I override it and became such a deep belly breather that I got no expansion up top. So I had to flip. So doing this and breathing here for me would actually just make my issue worse.
Mhm.
So making sure if it's this is something you want to like dive into for yourself, make sure you know that where you can breathe and where you can't breathe, and then if there's something you want to pursue, work with someone who's familiar with this and knows what position to put you in and what drills to give you, or else you're just going to make your issue worse.
Yeah, perfect. Well said. Well, you are at I am underscore Slater R. I will never forget that in case you guys are wondering why it's I am underscore Slater R. It's because someone took I am Slater.
Someone took I'm Slater. I'm still pissed about it. I tried DMing the guy to get it back. I might start offering him $20 or something, but we'll see. We'll see.
We'll see. So if you guys are interested in trying out some of the breathing techniques, I recommend going to Jared on Twitter. I recommend following him. He's a great follow. He's very knowledgeable. He posts a lot of helpful content. If you're someone who's looking to up your performance and pain, all of the above, just be a more BA human, I recommend following you. Um, so with that being said, thanks for coming on, and this was awesome. And let's do it again sometime.
Of course, definitely down. Always down to talk some shop and to explore different ideas, especially with someone who's open like you and Mitch. I know Mitch isn't here right now, but a lot of people unfortunately are super closed off to anything that challenges their idea. And it's super nice to be able to talk with people who want to learn and are open to different things, whether or not it agrees with what they're saying or not, just because that's the only way we get better is if someone tries to prove you wrong and you have to really defend your position and really truly understand, do you really believe this or maybe not? So it's always good to talk with people who are open and want open discussion.
Absolutely. Click the link in the description for a free 3-day trial with the Move Pain Free system. Don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more information in the future about how you can live an active life moving pain free.